Welcome back to Shredders Not Dead. If they make you bang your head, we'll talk with them or about them. And I'm joined today by Phil from Wothrosch. I hope I've pronounced that correctly.
Yep, that is 100% correct.
Beautiful. How are you doing today? What's been going on?
Yeah, I'm good. Just had to run a couple of errands this morning. Stuck a little bit in traffic, but it's the usual everyday bullshit, I guess. But other than that, had my daily dose of caffeine, so ready to go.
Brilliant. All right, well, we'll get talking about music. On listening to Wothrosch, I get this really interesting mix of influences, and it's obvious that, some of them are drawn from places that people who listen to black and death metal might be very familiar. There's also a lot of flavors in there going on that I think might be from outside of that. So, yeah, I suppose if you'd like to, I'd like to dig into some of the influences and your musical background in general.
Yeah. I mean, look, when we first got together and we started writing for this project, we didn't really talk about musical direction at all. The main sort of common theme that in the first place got us together was we wanted to create something that was extreme, not just extreme sounding, but like the whole atmosphere. We wanted to present to people an extreme experience. So, I mean, about like the musical influences, like you said, you got your, you know, we have black metal in there, death metal influences, a little bit of doom. I know there's a lot of people calling us sludge black metal. I can't really say that I mean, we like sludge metal, but we didn't really think about a sludge direction. We mostly consider ourselves to have more doom influences. But as far as personal influences go, I see behind you you have a Thy Art is Murder poster. And for me personally, Thy Art is Murder has been a huge influence, especially CJ with his vocals. Um,
mm,
but apart from that, I can talk about my death metal influences or my black metal influences. But I know that you said let's talk a little bit about outside of those. Um, the thing with Vothrosh is we're not just a musical project. We're 100% a band that wants to present an experience, and within that experience, we have a lot of influences that are outside of the music world, and cinema and film is an area that we draw a lot of inspiration from. So my guitar player Nasos, he is a sound designer. So
mm.
especially himself, when he composes, he's not so interested in composing in traditional sort of like structure or form, like you have your verse, your intro, your chorus. He mostly thinks about in the way that you would score a film. And I think that's apparent when you listen to our music. There's a lot of cinematic elements, especially with some of the longer tracks on the record. So I think apart from our musical influences, there are stuff from the film, world that definitely has inspired us. But if you want to
Mm.
get more specific, like, I've talked about my personal influences. Obviously, Septic Flesh is a big one. Anal Nathrok, another huge influence of mine. Triptychon, Celtic Frost, of course. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in there, 100%. But we don't consider ourselves like a death metal band or a black metal band. We just want to give ourselves the label of an extreme project, you know.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's human nature to want to put things in categories, and I've seen a lot of people trying. I think the sludge metal influence is a big one, and a similar band. Sorry, not a similar band to you, but Manta from Germany get similarly
Yes.
thrown sludge at them a lot, and honestly, I think it comes a little bit into sound production choices in that you both, although with very different outcomes, use really dense, very almost claustrophobic layerings of guitars and bass, to the point where things start resonating as if they've got orchestral strings in them. It's something I really, really love. Bolzer from Switzerland do a similar thing with 12-string guitars. And I think people maybe outside of the world of sound production jump on that and go, oh, it's sludge because it sounds sludgy and dense, not realizing that that in itself has a rich history of, fuzz pedals and doom influences and things that are more specific. But yeah, look, that was another thing I wanted to touch on, is that this record sounds huge. And without giving away too many of your secrets, what were some of the things that you did to make that happen?
Obviously, just to touch upon your first, like the first question, I think it's almost kind of like a Venn diagram. The world of sludge and doom. There are so many overlapping themes that I think it's easy for people to get caught up and mixed up with labeling or genre, like tags and all of that stuff. But I get what you're saying about dense guitars. For us, that was mostly like doom, since we're talking about genres. But hey, if people want to call it sludge, I'm not gonna oppose them. They can call it whatever the fuck they want, and it's still good for me, as long as the message is getting across. And what you said is exactly the message. We wanted to present something that was thick, huge, and almost kind of like intimidating to a certain degree. Now, with regards to production, it's not a secret. Like, we partnered up with who I think is one of the most up and coming extreme producers, George Emanuel. He's the guitar player of Lucifer's Child and the mastermind behind that band. He used to tour and was a member with legendary Greek black metal band Rotting Christ for almost 9 years. And he's done some incredible production stuff for a lot of well-known bands, not just in the underground scene. For example, he recently did, Alvaro from Watain. He has a side project, Zalpin. He did the production on that. He's done the last 3 or 4 Ajerodas records. So he's extremely talented. He's got an incredible ear, and I think his contribution, he was almost like the 4th member of this project. So, his input was his influence was incredibly huge and influential in the final sort of outcome. Now, if you want to get more technical with engineering stuff,
Please do.
You can definitely hit him up, because I'm not an engineer, but I can tell you something. When a production sounds good, it means, well, at least for me, it means 2 things. One, talent, but secondly, and most important, is work ethic and attention to detail. And I think because talent is a little bit, it's subjective, along with whether you like something or not. But work ethic and attention to detail are 100% objective. And with this record, we took our time. We were very patient. We started this project and the production of this album, what was it, late 2019? So it took us well over, 2.5 years. Mind you, there was COVID as well. But we really paid attention to detail, and we were very patient, because we, like my guitar player, myself, we all had bands before this. This is not our first band, and we've made mistakes before during production because we were either eager to get it out or, but this time round, because we had on our hands material that almost begged for, taking care of it appropriately, spending time with it, and paying attention to every little detail, almost to the point of becoming obsessive about it. And George, he fits that profile as a producer 100%. So I think that's what made the production so big sounding. But with these things, it's almost like it's, again, subjective. Some people might think it's a little bit too polished. Other people, there are objective criteria and subjective criteria with production. It boils down to taste 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this other ethos, I guess you would say, with production in similar genres. And Another band I think that do it similarly, but again with different outcomes, is Ulcerate, the New Zealand. I think they call themselves technical death metal, but it's a similar thing, right? You have to have it clean enough that the technicality and the detail can shine through, but either the writing or the production, and sometimes both, are at such an extreme level that it becomes overwhelming and starts to break up and hiss and crack. And you've got this, yourselves do it really, really, really well, I think. It's a real balancing act, I think, between letting individual parts shine through. But some people's palates, I guess, who might listen exclusively to the true Norwegian black metal, nothing wrong with that. I'm a big fan of Mayhem and all the
whatever true means anyway these days.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are people out there who'll be yelling at me, Mayhem aren't true black metal anymore, yada, yada, yada. But look, point is, it's a real balancing act, and I think you guys strike it really well. Do you feel actively while this is being produced that this balancing act is going on, or is it something that you look back on and it's just a product of the steps that you have to take anyway, if that makes sense?
Well, let me just start out by shouting out Ulcerate, Stare into Death and Be Still is still 100% a piece of art that is extremely influential for me. Not just musically, but also if you take a look at their the video clips they did, especially for Dissolve Orders. I think they partnered up with Den Sora. Incredible band. I think it's one of those records that are just monumental, just an amazing balance of extremity and thickness and all of that stuff. So, massive shout out to Ulcerate. I don't think, when I look back at the production process, we weren't really thinking about directions or how are we going to make this sound brutal, or we just, it's going to sound banal or cheesy, but we just literally recorded, what we wanted to record. And, when I was recording vocals with George, I wasn't really thinking. What I was thinking was my performance. So I wasn't really channeling any influences. I was thinking about my delivery. It was almost kind of like I stepped away from being a vocalist and becoming almost like an actor. So it was mostly kind of delivering. It was kind of like acting. But I don't think, because obviously that was like 2 years ago. So it's kind of hard to go back to that place. But we weren't really thinking about balancing things or, intentionally going down a specific route. We had spent a good amount of time on pre-production. So when the time came to present the stuff to George, we were already in a decent place that, we knew what we wanted to do. And like I said before, the main theme and the thing that got us all together, especially in the first place, but also during production, was, extremity. Let's present something extreme, but also in a way, not redefine what extreme means, but extreme is not just fast. It's not massive guitars. It can be sort of like a very dramatic delivery on instrumentation, let's say the voice or the guitars. So it's not necessarily, it's like, let's present to people and to the audience what we consider to be extreme, not just sonically, but also visually as well. And I think that's the common element that is still driving this project and for future efforts as well.
Moving away a little bit from the technicalities and a little bit more into the conceptual, Odium has this underlying discussion of the human condition, I think you've said. And I would never ask you to unwrap the meaning or give specific points to an album. I think that it's up to interpretation and the listener, of course, to sort of insert their own meaning or rather use their own worldview to view something and then make a critical decision on it. What I am interested in, though, is if this philosophical topic is something that's quite important to you, if there's a particular angle that you feel really strongly about, or is it more that a byproduct of often being into this genre of music is being constantly exposed to these ideas, and it just sort of being not just what you write about as a black or death metal band, but it goes with the territory, so to speak.
Yeah. So when we first got together and we started writing the material musically, um, it just so happened that we never really talked about lyrical direction. That was something that I decided to sort of like, take the reins and steer that ship sort of myself. And it just so happened that I was at a point in my life back then that what I really wanted to talk about was the things that either I was experiencing on a personal level, and things that I was experiencing mentally, physically, but also things that I was sort of experiencing in the outside world, and obviously, interpreting those through my own prisms, in a way. So it just so happened that I wanted to talk about these things. Also, I think Odium is a product of its time. This was a record that, we started pre-production 2018, and it ended up being released 2023, like in January. So like that's a 5 year time gap. And so many different things happen, not just for us personally, but on a global level as well.
Mm.
So, you know, um, through this sort of like 5 year time frame, like we had like, breakups, we had people passed away, family members, there was a global pandemic. So I think obviously being inspired as well from the material sonically, it just so happened that I wanted to channel all of these things that I was experiencing and the things that I felt that my bandmates were experiencing as well, and write about it. So essentially, what it is Odium. It mostly touches upon themes of anxiety, paranoia, darkness, sorrow, things that everyday people get to experience, but not a lot of people talk about, or they don't want to touch upon or talk about. We just did. It's almost the experience of Odium is lyrically that is almost kind of like lifting a mirror in front of you. And at first you look at yourself, but then the deeper you look, it's kind of like you're peeling away the layers, and eventually, well, you reach the center, or what is like the nucleus. And what we
Mm.
and what we ended up looking at was something that we didn't really like. So at its very core, Odium is it's almost like a misanthropic declaration. But as I said, with this project, it's not like we're a band that, oh, that's what we're going to talk about on our next album, or we just talk about things that we feel like talking about, or we play the type of music that we want to play. Like if people are expecting an Odium Part 2 for our next album, well, they're in for a surprise.
Mm.
So, and that's like, but the one thing that I can guarantee people is that anything that we put out, whether that is musically or visually, it's going to be extreme, 100%.
Look forward to it. So Vothrosh sort of bucks a trend a little bit in that you've said in other interviews that there's no immediate intention or no immediate urge to go and perform live. I suppose that's very different to a lot of modern bands that almost see album writing as a rite of passage to going on tour. And I respect that. There's a lot of bands, I think, that are almost athletic in the way that they deliver live shows. I'm a huge fan of Cannibal Corpse, but I definitely think that there's an aspect what they do live that is critical to the art. And I don't necessarily think that yet exists with your band, and it's really intriguing that it's this really beautiful thing. I don't mean this as a criticism, but I'm curious as to if you all felt this way when the band was formed, or if it's just a product of what inspired you to form the band in the first place. How did you all come to the decision to sort of focus on, like you said earlier, delivering almost a theatrical piece of music with no intention to go hit the road with it?
Well, the thing with our project is that wow, there are so many things that you touched upon there that I just gotta formulate the right sentences. Let's start with the live element for us. Um, at first, we didn't really think about approaching the question of are we going to be performing live or not. That was something that we ended up deciding on because honestly, we wanted to focus more on creating art rather than presenting that art in a traditional live element. What gets us really inspired and what gets us very excited is to do things that more traditional extreme acts are not doing at the moment. So um, we'd much rather spend time and focus our creative energies on doing things outside of the traditional realm of what a band does these days, which is what you said. You write an album, you produce it, you release it, you go on tour, and then you go back to the studio again. It's kind of like a cycle. And I understand why a lot of bands do it. I can I can tell you there's very little bands that enjoy doing that in that time frame, but
Mm.
it's necessary if you want to earn a living. So for us, it was mostly like focusing on other things that require a lot of energy that live bands don't really have that energy left because, setting up tours, setting up, lives and all of that, it's almost as a big element as producing an album. So there are a few things that we are preparing for the future that are going to make a lot more sense, which I can't reveal right now. But we're working on some projects that will actually sort of support what I'm saying right now, that we'd much rather spend our time focusing on other things that help us sort of fortify that element of that almost being like an art collective, not just being a band, a traditional band. Um, I don't have anything against, obviously, a live setting, but I don't think we are the project for that. And our music being cinematic, it almost begs for a different experience. I'm not closing any doors on a future sort of show, but I'd much rather do a one-off show at some point in the future rather than being this live band, just because being a live band these days is so draining that I'd much rather spend that energy on other creative efforts within the realm of Wothrosch, of course, and
Hmm.
presenting to people other sort of new and fresh ideas in the world of extreme art.
I'm really intrigued by this idea of using the term collective, and I intended to ask about it before this interview, but you've definitely given me the right opportunity to bring it up. Obviously, it brings to mind, good friends of the podcast we've had on before, the Ocean Collective use that to refer to, say, a nucleus of members that come in and do things that are musicians and also producers and a whole range. But for yourselves, I was wondering what collective entails and what sort of support and energy you're drawing from these people that are involved that maybe you wouldn't use the traditional word band member for argument's sake.
Yeah. So for us, it was important to create, like you said, a nucleus of people, of everyone that we're working with. And because our vision is not just a musical one, it's a visual one as well. Like I said, we're not just inspired. Our influences are not just musical. We draw influences from film, from literature, poetry. So we wanted to almost present to people an idea that with everyone that we're working with, photographers, videographers, producers, they're all part of this project that is not just a band. We're not just a musical act because our ideas are not just ideas that get expressed only through music. So for us, it was important to declare ourselves almost as a collective. And I know that's not, you know, it's not a new concept. Of course, there's, like you said, the Ocean Collective. In Europe, we have Amun Ra with the Church of Ra and what they've been doing, like 3 or 4 bands together, but also photographers. So that was an idea and that was a concept that resonated with us deeply, and we wanted to create our version of that, and present to people our interpretation of that. And because we're still a young project and a relatively new project, it is hard for me to yet reveal a lot of the things that, like I said before, fortify the concept of the collective. But just be patient, and in the next year, 2 years, everything is going to make a lot more sense. There's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes right now, which are very exciting, and I wish I could talk about. But yes, the collective is a word that has a lot of meaning to us, and this was a very, very conscious decision to sort of brand our project as a collective, because we want to feel that every single person that we are working with, he is also part of this project. But not just the people that we're working with, people who have purchased music, people who dive into the experience that we present them. We want them to feel that they're part of this collective. Almost kind of like, I don't want to call it a movement because we're not striving for something. We're not preaching an ideology. We're preachers of extremity. If you like extreme art, then this is the collective to sort of dab your feet in, I guess.
Yeah, understood. I think that's coming up on a good place to round things up. I do, however, have one more question
Yeah.
on the concept of collaborators. Pretty amazing to have Nicholas Kvarfoth of Sweden's Shining, not Norway's Shining, very different band. Both very good. Go check them out. How did that come about? And how do you make sure that when you get someone like that, that you use their talents to their full potential, which I think you did on that particular single?
Well, thank you. Let me just start off by saying Shining released a couple of days ago what I think is an album of the year contender. The latest one and his work on the latest Shining, which is a self-titled album, I think, as well. It's just incredible. So if people haven't checked that out yet, go check out the latest Shining album. It's some of the best material that the band has written in the last few years. Now, to answer your question, Shining has been a band, and specifically Nicholas has been an artist that I've been pretty much inspired by since my early teenage years. Getting exposed to some of his work, specifically Halmstad, not just musically, but also aesthetically, lyrically as well. It was a project that I felt very close to. So I remember when we were recording Mass, we were doing the vocals with George. We came up to that part of that song, and I knew that I wanted someone to come in and do that sort of recitation of those lyrics, and I did it myself, and it sounded good, it sounded fine, but I knew that we needed to have someone to sort of come in and do this sort of vocal delivery that's going to really help the song transcend to the next level. And the first person that came to mind was Niklas. Obviously, we were talking with Niklas before, because he was very intrigued about the part. He asked about the lyrics, and obviously getting him on the phone and talking with him for 2 hours was an experience in itself. Um, but I'm very grateful and very humbled by his participation on this album. Now, how do you make sure that you get the most out of an artist like Nicholas? Well, you don't. You present him your idea, you give him whatever art you have to give him, and then you just let him do his thing. It's pretty much the same thing with Seth, who created our cover artwork. You don't
Mm.
really want to tamper with an artist like Nicholas or Seth. You want to feed him with any information that they might need, but then you just let them do their thing. You don't really want to steer them or guide them to any specific direction. And that's what happened with Nicholas. I just gave him the material. I told him what my vision was, but I was like, just, do your thing, because it just so happens that your thing has been something that has inspired me for so many years. So
Mm.
yeah, but very, very grateful to have the chance to collaborate with an artist like Nicholas and his magnitude, 100%.
It must have been a hell of a feeling to listen for that first time to what he'd performed then, with that in mind, with what you delivered, and
Well,
sort of
yeah, so he first sent me his vocal because it was like a one take dry vocal track. And when I heard that without the music, I literally got, goosebumps. And the first thing that I did, I just called George and I was like, you know, we got it. This is it. This is, this has to go on the record. Because this is something very unique. So yeah, absolutely.
brilliant. Well, Phil, I really appreciate you coming on, having a chat, and hopefully we can have you back on to discuss some of these yet to be revealed projects outside of what's
Yeah.
been discussed here today. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well,
If it's the quality that the album has been, we're all going to be blown away, I'm sure. But if you've got any
well,
last thoughts, I'd love to hear them. And
yeah. So I just want to say, thanks for having me, Jordan, and to all those to all your listeners, go check out Odium if you haven't done so already. We recently put out a video for Tumor as well, directed by Claudio Marino. Check it out, and if you like it, make sure you follow us on Instagram and check out some of our merch. All of that stuff helps us a lot to keep going. And yeah, thank you for the response towards Odium. It really means a lot. And thanks for having me, man.